Most gardeners either throw kitchen scraps straight into the trash or dump them into a pile and hope for the best. Both approaches cost you. When scraps rot anaerobically or get buried improperly, you lose nitrogen to the air, attract pests, and create unstable organic matter that actually robs nutrients from your soil instead of feeding it. I've seen raised beds stall for weeks because someone buried half-decomposed food waste and assumed it would break down eventually. Eventually isn't good enough when you're growing food. If you're serious about soil health and yields, kitchen scraps are not waste. They're a controlled input. And today, we're breaking down 7 easy ways to compost kitchen scraps directly in your garden systems without wrecking your beds or attracting rodents. You can trench compost between active rows if you control depth and carbon. Trench composting works extremely well in in-ground gardens, but only if you respect spacing and ratios. I dig a trench 20 to 30 centimeters deep between crop rows, never directly under plant root zones. Then I mix kitchen scraps with dry carbon before burying. The ratio matters. For every bucket of chopped vegetable scraps, I mix in roughly 2 buckets of shredded dry leaves or torn cardboard. That keeps the carbon to nitrogen balance close to 25 to 1 or 30 to 1. Once buried, I backfill firmly and water lightly. In warm soil, that trench becomes a microbial hotspot. In about 3 to 4 weeks during the growing season, most of that material is partially stabilized and feeding surrounding roots without tying up nitrogen. I avoid doing this in tight raised beds that are already planted densely because root disturbance can stress crops. But between wider rows like corn, tomatoes, or brassicas, it's highly effective. You can use a compost cage inside a raised bed without sacrificing space. In compact gardens, and especially raised beds, dedicating space to a compost bin feels wasteful, but a simple wire cylinder about 30 to 40 centimeters wide placed in a bed corner can function as an in-situ compost reactor. I've done this in 1.2 meter wide beds successfully. Layer kitchen scraps with shredded carbon inside the cage, keeping it moist but never soggy. Because it's contained, aeration stays decent. Roots from nearby crops eventually grow toward that nutrient-rich zone. I've seen peppers and tomatoes noticeably outperform plants on the opposite end of the same bed. The key is moderation. Don't overload it with high-moisture scraps like melon rinds without balancing carbon. And avoid meat or oily food waste. This system is ideal for vegetable trimmings, coffee grounds, crushed eggshells, and small fruit waste. You can pre-compost scraps in a small hot pile before garden application. If you generate larger volumes of scraps, especially from a family kitchen, I prefer pre-composting in a dedicated pile before introducing material to beds. I build a compact pile at least 1 cubic meter in size, combining kitchen scraps with yard waste at roughly a 2 to 1 carbon to nitrogen volume ratio. The difference between mediocre compost and reliable compost is temperature control. I monitor internal heat to ensure the pile reaches 55 to 65 degrees Celsius for several days. That thermophilic phase reduces pathogens and weed seeds. A long-stem compost thermometer makes this precise instead of guesswork. I use a heavy-duty stainless steel model with a 36-inch probe, so I can measure the core temperature of larger piles accurately. It's durable, easy to read, and designed for deep piles. If you're serious about composting properly, it's one of those tools that quickly pays for itself. I've linked the one I use in the description. Once the pile finishes its active heating cycles and cures for 4 to 6 weeks, I incorporate the finished compost into raised beds at about 2 to 3 centimeters depth, worked into the top 10 centimeters of soil. That produces consistent results without nitrogen drawdown. You can sheet compost directly under mulch if you keep it thin. Sheet composting works beautifully in no-dig systems, but excess thickness causes problems. I apply a thin layer of chopped kitchen scraps directly onto soil, no more than 1 to 2 centimeters thick, Then immediately cover with at least 5 to 8 centimeters of dry mulch, such as straw or shredded leaves. The mulch acts as a biofilter and carbon buffer. Microbes move upward from the soil and begin decomposition in a balanced environment. I've used this method in perennial beds and around fruit trees with strong results. But thickness is everything. Dumping a 10-centimeter layer of scraps under mulch will create anaerobic zones and smells. In raised beds growing heavy feeders like zucchini or cucumbers, this slow feed approach supports mid-season growth without synthetic inputs. You can blend scraps into compost teas if they're fully stabilized first. This is where many growers get reckless. Fresh kitchen scraps do not belong in compost tea brewers. But once scraps have been fully composted and cured into stable compost, you can extract microbial populations into water and apply them to soil or even hydroponic substrates. I've used finished compost derived largely from kitchen waste to brew aerated compost tea for 24 hours, with added molasses at about 5 milliliters per liter of water. That solution, applied as a soil drench, boosts microbial diversity. In hydroponic transitions where I'm integrating organic biology into inert media, I use filtered extracts very cautiously and only with stable compost. Immature material can destabilize reservoirs quickly. The principle is simple. Scraps must become stable humus first, then they become an asset in liquid form. You can use bokashi-style fermentation, but only if you finish it properly. Fermentation systems allow you to process kitchen scraps anaerobically indoors. I've tested this approach. It's fast and reduces odors, but the fermented material is not finished compost. It's pre-digested organic matter. After fermentation, I bury the material at least 20 centimeters deep in soil and allow it to convert aerobically for 2 to 3 weeks before planting above it. In raised beds, I only do this in sections that will remain unplanted temporarily. If you plant too soon, you risk root damage from acidic conditions. Used correctly, it's efficient. Used carelessly, it burns crops. You can simply chop scraps smaller and speed everything up. Size reduction is underrated. Large chunks of cabbage stems or citrus peels take significantly longer to decompose. When I chop scraps into pieces smaller than 2 to 3 centimeters before composting or trenching, decomposition accelerates dramatically. Surface area drives microbial access. This applies whether you're building a hot pile, trench composting, or feeding a compost cage. In warm conditions, finely chopped scraps integrated with adequate carbon can visibly break down within 2 weeks. This small habit reduces pest attraction, improves balance, and keeps decomposition predictable. It's simple, but it changes outcomes. Here's what matters most. Kitchen scraps are not automatically beneficial. They become beneficial when managed correctly. Depth, carbon balance, moisture, oxygen, and timing determine whether you're building soil or creating problems. Every method we covered works because it respects those fundamentals. I've tested these approaches in open ground gardens, tight raised beds, and biologically integrated hydroponic systems. The difference between mediocre results and high yields always comes down to control and observation. If you're composting at scale, monitor temperature. If you're trenching, measure depth. If you're mulching over scraps, control thickness. Small adjustments prevent big setbacks. If this kind of grounded, practical gardening approach is how you want to grow your food, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who still throws scraps in the trash or buries them randomly. The goal here isn't just reducing waste. It's building soil that produces stronger crops season after season. Better systems grow better food. And that starts with how you handle what most people throw away.